Yes, for the record, I watched a couple of animes in a couple of months. While One Punch Man becomes quite a disappointing ride, I really hope that Charlotte can get rid of the bad taste of the awful second half of Saitama's unclear motivation. So let's get straight into what I think of Charlotte. So, what is Charlotte essentially? Like One Punch Man in some ways, Charlotte is essentially a superhero anime. In a typical high school setting of Japan, the protagonist Yu Otosaka is someone who turns out to have superpowers, which is the ability of possessing someone for a short period of time. Yu-san uses these superpowers to get through cheating tests and looking at girls' boobs. Hey, if I got that power, I would have done that too. Before he can get too far, his attempts are noticed by Nao Tomori, another girl with superpowers that has the ability to disappear, but only to one target only. Together with a few superpowered friends, they are dedicated on finding these kids who have superpowers and protect them from the evil scientists that are about to experiment on them and make them go insane. Those goddamn typical evil scientists. Here's the thing that I noticed about animes, and something that I want the latest Star Wars movie to take notes from. This anime, which wasn't really good overall, can still be able to keep my attention. There are like millions and millions of animes out there, especially One Punch Man, that can keep the audience's eyes into the screen without even the needs of throwing pointless action scenes after the other. How can an anime manage to make people watch it straight to a season in just one run, and yet the latest Western blockbuster movies bore people to death? Maybe you need to start taking notes from Japan, but I think Hollywood is still in trauma after World War II. And yes, Charlotte is not that great, but if there's one thing that I don't have to lie about, it's the fact that I actually enjoyed watching it. So, what do I like about Charlotte? Well, let's talk about the protagonist. This is one of the few examples where the protagonist is the most interesting characters when compared to the other side characters. It is maybe because the only character that has suffered through some serious change is the protagonist himself. Yu Otosaka might start off as a freaking asshole, but that's great. That's exactly what I want from a protagonist in the beginning, because that opens to a lot of changes. It's not like Saitama where he starts off as a jerk and ends up as a jerk. A lot of girls absolutely adore Yu-san for him being a hunky boy, especially Yu Imoto-san, but to me there's a lot bigger character development inside Yu-san's character. It is by far one of the most insane character progression I have ever seen in a while. Yu-san might have acted like your typical everyday anime protagonist, but the deeper you go into the anime, oh my god, this guy went through some unbelievable change. And when I say unbelievable, I mean downright uncanny. And yet somehow in a lot of ways, this anime manages to make it incredibly plausible. The anime is not afraid to commit some of the worst kind of psychological tortures to the protagonist, to the point where he could probably go completely insane. Charlotte might have looked innocent in the front, but inside it's freaking scary. This anime knows no mercy, and it will do everything to make sure that Yu-san's mental health is completely torn into pieces. That is until the second half, where they just completely give it up. I'm gonna get to that later. The interesting bits of Yu-san cannot be backed up with other characters, however, because the rest of the characters in the series are nothing but stereotypes. Either that or their personality is defined by their most noticeable trait, and most of them only have one. Seriously, there's the tough girl, there's the innocent girl, there's the hyperactive fanboy, and even the main protagonist is basically just a standard typical anime hunky boy. In fact, he really looks like Kirito from Sword Art Online. Tomori is a pretty good typical badass girl, and who is apparently the only character that is given proper character development, at least when compared to the other characters. She's supposed to be the love interest for the main character Yu, and to be fair, they do have some time to properly develop their character. It's just that throughout their interactions, they're incredibly indifferent towards each other. There's a scene in which Tomori is beaten up by a couple of girls. Instead of saving her, Yu-san just stood there, watching, for some reason. And instead of adding some character development, that scene ends up being completely freaking pointless. And the best part, their entire love story ends in the most laughable confession I have ever seen in my entire life. It is an incredibly horribly done confession, and I'm surprised that it actually went through the QA department. So I'm sorry I have to spoil it to you because it is just so predictable. You know that they're gonna hang out. Yu-san comes to Tomori-san and he confesses that he loves her. Tomori-san is so absolutely freaking badass, she reacts like a wall. And I mean literally. It's like what happens if you said, I love you to a brick of wall. The word love comes out of Yu-san's mouth and she just goes, I love you too, whatever, I'll see you later. I mean, I mean, wow, what a beautiful romance subplot. I mean, I thought romance are supposed to have two characters that actually really like each other or something. Screw that crap if you can just put Twilight level of chemistry in it. So the anime initially starts off with a basic problem of the week formula. Have breakfast, find a gifted, go to gifted location, convince gifted to stop, repeat. All of these are standard, typical, episodic anime stuff, and I enjoyed it because I'm hyped up for a twist of this formula, and eventually it does happen. One episode follows the same formula but puts a rather interesting twist and concludes the first half of the anime. From that point on, we enter the second half where a lot of crazy things start to happen and a lot more unpredictable things begin to show up. It's fortunate for me to say that this anime is not like One Punch Man where the first half is good and the second half is bad. No, Charlotte is an anime where the first half is good and the second half is okay. I think it's kind of the same. Now, what's my problem with the second half of the anime? Well, it's very simple. There is way too much climax. There's a lot of points in this entire anime where you could just end in a snap of the finger, but the anime continues on, and they did it again, and they did it again, and they did it again, and it continues on.
Just get on with it.
There's a huge significant plot twist in the middle of the second half of the anime. The plot twist itself wasn't really the problem. The problem happens on what the characters are going to do after the plot twist happened, which is literally nothing but taking plot elements from Steins Gate. And after the time travel nonsense from Steins Gate finally resolved, it completely destroys the point of the tragic ending from the first half. And the worst part, at that moment, there's literally no issues left. The characters are living happily ever after, and there are still like a few more episodes. So I was like, okay, what now? What should we do to put that another conflict? I don't know, just put some random villains in it and we'll be fine. What? And then literally the villains got decimated embarrassingly quickly, and what now? Happily ever after, right? Nope, there is still one more quest to do. Oh my freaking god, just end the anime already, for God's sake. Charlotte is a story that has absolutely no idea how to end and what to end it with. At least in One Punch Man, despite how horrible the second half could be, it knows exactly how to end it. A big freaking awesome superpower showdown. Seriously, there could have been a superpower showdown between the characters, or maybe a supervillain that does have powers but only use it for bad stuff. Even the protagonist uses it for something bad. In the first episode of the freaking anime, have you ever considered those possibilities? Wouldn't that be more interesting? What both One Punch Man and Charlotte lack is some form of foreshadowing, because if you don't foreshadow things in the first few episodes, then when they pop up in the climax, it becomes sudden and unconvincing. I don't like when the anime just doesn't know where to freaking end. And what I don't like is how the second half of the entire anime picks all of the possible endings and combine them in such a contrived way. How about taking one ending and focusing how to end the anime with that one particular ending? The final episode of this anime is literally its own story. Yusan's entire journey in the final episode could be extended into the second half, hell, even one entire season, but they cramped it up in one episode. It is so incredibly unconvincing. I love the ending of the first half of the anime because it could introduce us to some complex psychological story and the mental deterioration of a false protagonist. It opens up the story into a lot of changes in an uncharted world. Hell, Yu Otosaka himself could end up being the villain, which could have been a shocking twist that you did not see coming. And not only that, it's very plausible. However, the writers didn't do that because they don't have some balls. Instead, they play it completely safe, and they have absolutely no idea how to end this anime. It just ends up being completely unfocused. Charlotte is not a good anime, but it is enjoyable enough, at least to me. Instead of seeing it as an anime of high school students with superpowers, I see this as a character progression and eventually mental deterioration of Yu Otosaka. When I see it that way, it turns a flawed anime to be actually pretty enjoyable, and I wish that the anime could focus more on him, especially the possibility of him being a bad guy. I love this anime based on the incredibly well done and downright uncanny character progression of the main protagonist, but the rest of the aspects are just a huge mess, and the anime does not have enough balls than what I think. For me, Charlotte is 3 stars out of 5. It is unfortunately an anime that is incredibly flawed in a lot of aspects, but I went out actually enjoying it. I enjoyed the main character's progression more so than his actual personality, because it is something that is genuinely interesting. But the rest of the anime is meh at best. That's all for the review today. If you liked this video, go ahead and click the like button and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.